Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Snark Bait. I'm Christy.
I'm Sophie, and today we are taking a trip to Bachelor Nation and we are talking all things Kaitlyn Bristowe. There's a lot to get to, so I guess let's dive in, Christy. Are you ready?
I'm ready, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Sophie, how has your Monday been? April 14th, we are recording. How's it been so far?
I'm tired. I think you and I are both really tired. We're recording this after work. It's almost 8 p.m. Eastern time. 5 p.m. your time, and we're sleepy, but nothing puts some pep into my step more than doing this show. So I think this will give me a little boost of energy.
Yeah, I don't really know what's in the water, but I went out with a couple of girlfriends of mine last night. We went to Lido Island, if anyone's familiar with Newport. It's this really cute area, and they have like Le Labo, they have Aesop. So we went out and got dinner and drinks there, and I had literally a glass and a half of red wine, and I have such a steaming headache. It's horrible. Like I think that's what is kind of causing me to be a little bit not feeling the best. But you know what? Kaitlyn Bristowe is someone that I feel very passionately about. Sketch comedy is something that I take very seriously. Kaitlyn Bristowe is someone I take very seriously. And I'm really excited to kind of go down memory lane because her lore extends like almost a decade at this point.
Yeah, she's been on the scene for a minute. And also when Christy, when you texted me, you're like, I had one glass of wine, one and a quarter. You're like 1.25 glass of wine. I was like, that'll do it. That'll do it.
Apparently, Bordeaux's do that to you. I had a red blend from France, and my friend goes, I knew when you ordered a Bordeaux that was going to happen. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that like the type of red wine will get you more hungover or not as hungover. Did you know that?
Well, here's the thing about me, and I don't even know if you know this because I'm always embarrassed to talk about this, is that I am like somewhat allergic to wine.
Mm.
I have a really bad reaction to it. And same with my mom and my sister. It's just like genetically, like I just don't drink. And I love, good thing I love beer. I love like so many, because I'm not like other girls, you know? I'm a cool girl.
I love beer.
But I do love beer. So like I have other options. Like when I'm with girlfriends and everyone else wants to get wine, I just get a beer unless we go to a wine bar. And then I'm like,
Mm.
I don't know what to do. But moral of the story is I don't react well to wine. When we went to actually Provence, France, and we did a winery and I had like even like a few sips usually will make me feel like shit. I had a few sips. It's because of the sulfates
Hmm.
that American wines use. Like the wines that we have here have sulfates in them and they make you feel like shit. And then you go to European countries and they don't have sulfates in their wine. And I found that I can actually drink them. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think every time you go to a wine bar, you'll have to ask for the natural organic wine because then they don't use pesticides on their grapes, and then it's less. Well, you won't feel like this. Basically, is what I'm getting at. So.
Wow. Okay, maybe I have a new lease on life and I just need to like order natural wines from now on.
Yeah, yeah. But
Maybe I'll start to like enjoy drinking wine because I've always kind of just been like, you know.
I love red wine. It's my kryptonite. And actually, interestingly enough, Kaitlyn Bristowe, who obviously is the topic of conversation today, she has her own vino line called Spades and Sparrows, which I know we're going to get into that in the outline. But have you ever tried her wine line? I'm assuming no.
No, but you know what it reminds me of? The
Hmm.
name reminds me of Shade and Fog.
Oh my God. For those of you that are unfamiliar, I had started a podcast called Shade and Fog with a best friend of mine. Her name is Emily, about dating in San Francisco. And that was the OG show. But maybe Kaitlyn Bristowe took inspiration from my Shade and Fog podcast.
I feel like she probably did. Okay, Christy. So I guess let's dive into it. What are you said you take Kaitlyn Bristowe very seriously.
Yeah.
What are your initial feelings on Kaitlyn Bristowe?
Well, first of all, every month we do a Snark Bait team meeting and we kind of all just sit down. We talk about who we're going to cover over the next month. And we have a Google Sheet if you guys are unfamiliar with, or excuse me, a Google form in our link in bio in our Instagram at SnarkBaitPod if you're not already following. We get a lot of suggestions. And Kaitlyn Bristowe is one of those people that we've gotten suggested many a time. And so we thought, okay, we've never delved into a Bachelor person really.
Besides Nick Viall, by the
Oh,
way.
excuse me. Of course, our first episode was Nick Viall. Um, but Kaitlyn Bristowe was the first female Bachelor person that we've decided to cover. And I was super into The Bachelor back in like 2010s. So much so I went to a taping of after the final rose, after the Paradise season where Dean and Caitlyn
Kaylin, yeah.
got engaged. And I've just been like a Bachelor super fan for as long as I can remember. And I remember her Beyond Crystal season was a fabulous season. And her season was probably the best season of the Bachelor franchise that there ever was. And I feel as if so many heavy hitters from that franchise have come out of her season and fortunately or unfortunately are still relevant. I think of like Jared Haben, Ben
Yeah.
Higgins, Sean Booth, who still has relevancy though outside of the
Hmm.
Bachelor world, Tanner Tolbert, Jade.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know her presence as a Bachelor person and everyone on her season, they still maintain such relevancy. So I think I don't know, it's very of course we would cover her. There's so much lore to her.
Yeah, totally. And that was such an era. I'm with you. Like I watched those seasons too. I feel like it was like 2014 through like 2018. I was so hot on The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. And you could go on that show and be set for life from just gaining Instagram followers. Now it's very different. The ratings have gone way down. And I know that your conspiracy theory is that Love is Blind is kind of the reason why it's filled that gap because The Bachelor
Yeah.
just wasn't hitting the same, and now we have so many other options like Love is Blind. Um, but yeah, I loved her season of The Bachelorette. I loved her on Chris Soules' season. I guess let's back up. So, who is Kaitlyn Bristowe pre-Bachelor Bachelorette beginnings? She's originally from Ludeck, Alberta, Canada, and she was a dancer. She moved to Vancouver, British Columbia as an adult, where she worked as a dance instructor. Her mom was also a ballerina, kind of like ran in her family. Also, what fascinates me about Vancouver is that it's like the Hollywood of Canada, which is always fun to me to think about.
They actually film a lot of shows
Yes,
in Vancouver because of like some
yes.
tax reasons.
Yeah, and like every Lifetime movie is filmed
Yeah.
there, which I also love. Her parents had a messy divorce after a long and happy marriage, and she was 18 when they divorced, which she says adds to her anxiety about relationships ending. And Olivia, our researcher, actually chimed in, said she can relate to this. She said, I always wonder what messes you up more, whether it's better to grow up with divorced parents or for your parents to break up when you're an adult and for your previous family life to feel like a lie. What do you think about that, Christy?
Oh, I feel very passionately about this. So, my parents got divorced when I was very young. My sister doesn't even remember them being together. So, all I've known is divorced parents, and my parents are still get along so well. They were just sharing an Airbnb together when they were visiting my sister and my niece. We've traveled to Asia together back in November. Like, we still very much are a family unit. Now, to be clear, it wasn't always like that. When
Hmm.
I was younger, they didn't always get along so swimmingly. But I am kind of always of the idea that if it's all I kind of know, I'm not pining for something that I don't realize what it would have been, if this is just my life.
Hmm.
So I would actually go on to say that it's better to kind of grow up with divorced parents, knowing that's just your
Hmm.
life and how it is versus knowing differently and then having that kind of be dispelled, so to
Yeah,
speak.
totally. That's so, I feel like that's really helpful insight. And I think that, like we say, we would like to really psychologically analyze our subjects here at Snark.
Yeah.
And I think that it probably does inform when that happens to you, it probably does inform how you approach relationships as an adult. So, oh my God, I cannot believe how long ago this was. It was 2015
A
when
decade.
a decade ago, when Caitlyn first gained widespread attention as a contestant, season 19 of The Bachelor. This was Chris Soules' season. Chris Soules, oh, good old farm boy. She placed third, losing to Becca Tilley and Whitney Biscoff. She was like such a fan favorite. Do you remember watching her on this season, Christy?
Of course. And I remember her kind of playing this tough Canadian girl. Like she couldn't be bought by producers, so to speak. Like I distinctly remember there was one group date and they were at some like bar slash saloon and Caitlyn Bristowe got upset because I think Chris had pulled maybe Whitney aside or Becca and Caitlyn felt very less than. And she was also super close with Becca and Whitney at the time as well. And I remember her relaying that incident back on her podcast off the vine and her saying, I really prided myself on being this tough bitch from Canada. And I was like, no matter what, these producers can't make me cry. And sure enough, I ended up crying. Like I realized that this is holy shit. This experience in and of itself is so real for me. And I didn't realize
Hmm.
how real it could get. Like I thought I was just gonna be on a fun reality show and that was that. But I
Hmm.
think I mean she's known as romance from straight out of this franchise. So I guess
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And we will go through all of her, just all her very complicated love life that has since followed. But she is kind of just one of the original, like, stalwart Bachelor celebrities to come out of that franchise. Like, she has made an entire career out of it. And again, this was the time to do it, was that era, like 2014 through 2018. But yeah, 10 years later, she is still relevant. She is still, making a living from her following that she gained from this franchise. So, yeah, she was like the spunky standout from Chris Soules' season, became the Bachelorette on season 11. And oh my God, this was so fucked up. Her season started off as a split season with other contestant from Chris Soules' season, Britt Nilsson. And the men voted on who they wanted to be the Bachelorette and Kaitlyn won. But how fucked up is that for Britt? Like, we don't talk enough about how fucked up those producers are.
Yeah, that was such an unprecedented thing that they decided to do because that was the first time that they had pitted literally two
Hmm.
women against one another. And it was like, it was a full-blown war to figure out who the men liked more. And I couldn't even imagine having been in Britt's position to feel so excited to get the opportunity to be the lead on the biggest show in America, only to find out that the majority of the men actually don't want to date you and they want to date your opponent. I mean, that's so traumatizing. And the Bachelor franchise
Mm.
has since kind of reformulated that. And with, I think, Gabby and Rachel, right? They
Yeah.
had a joint season, but it wasn't like they were competing for the men's attention. They just had a joint Bachelorette season
Hmm.
together. So
Yeah.
it's like they reformulated it to be more 2025 appropriate. But this is brutal, man.
You would never see me again. It would just be like so traumatic. Um, so famously on Caitlyn's season, and this was a big scandal, she had sex with one of her contestants prior to the fantasy suites. And this was a huge deal. And they played moaning sounds when this aired. I was so shook. And it was none other than enemy of the pod, Nick Viall. And so, yeah, they had sex before fantasy suites. She ended up not choosing Nick Viall. Nick Viall, oh, this is also important to note, is that he came in after the season had already started. And he had previously been the runner-up of Andy Dorfman's season, which was the season of The Bachelor before this. And she ended up not choosing Nick Viall. He was runner-up again, and she chose Shawn Booth, and that was her fiance for the following 3 years. We will get more into that. But this was a very at after the final rose or the men tell all, whatever it was, there was a lot of slut shaming happening because of how much the audience just completely shamed Caitlyn for her decision to have sex with Nick Viall prior to Fantasy Suites. Um, and it resulted in Chris Harrison saying the word whore 6 times in different ways. One tweet read, Caitlyn is a selfish whore with no morals and a pathetic excuse for a human being. He notably read the tweets without naming the handles, so he maintained the anonymity of these harassers. Um, yeah, do you remember this happening, Christy? How did you feel about it?
Of course. And you have to understand, in 2025, we look at this and are clutching our pearls. We're horrified at this behavior on
Hmm.
national television. But in 2015, like you have to remember and understand if you can take yourself back to that time, um, we were not used to seeing women so freely having
Hmm.
sex on a show that literally was predicated on only saving that moment for fantasy suites. And God forbid you have sex with more than one person in the fantasy suites. That in and of itself was a big deal. But to have sex not even in that very contained space was unheard of. And I remember just like feeling that the entire world was so upset at her. It almost kind of harkened back to like Britney Spears when people were attacking her for being a quote unquote slut because she was dancing with her belly button showing. It just felt so antiquated in the way that we were so upset at Caitlyn for
Hmm.
literally being human. And if you think about it, I remember in her season, she was, I think, 30 years old. Yeah, because she's
Hmm.
39 now. So she's around 29, 30 years old. And I remember thinking, when you are dating, let's just say she's a 30-year-old woman, she's single, she's out in a city, she's dating five people at once. Plenty of my friends, myself, in fact, have been in that situation where you may be sleeping with more than one person. So long as you're being safe, that's not something to be ashamed of or feel judged at. It's a very normal part of dating. But of course, when you're in this container of a reality show that almost sees sex before marriage as being like, oh, so wrong,
Hmm.
she was attacked and so unfairly so. And it's crazy, but it does not shock me.
Yeah. And she also, first of all, like imagine if this was a man who it was a bachelor lead who had sex with one of his female contestants before the fantasy suites. Again, he would not be at fault. It would probably be the contestant that was shamed. And that is just the society we live in because we live in a
Patriarchy.
patriarchy. And also she was not given a heads up that this was going to happen. So she was like kind of blindsided. And but this ended up being such a I don't know. I don't know what the word is, like a not a turning point because I feel like there were so many moments after this happened that felt slut shamey and disgusting towards women on the show. But I like what some outlets said at the time, including Vulture. And they kind of praised her openness towards sex. Like a lot of progressive and liberal outlets and people on the internet back then were like, wow, damn, like Caitlyn is someone to look up to. And Vulture, for instance, wrote Caitlyn's influence finally seems to be forcing the franchise to acknowledge that in modern relationships between grown women and men, sex typically comes not only before marriage, but way, way before someone gets down on one knee. As Caitlyn has said before, it's only practical to test drive your options before making a commitment that will last the rest of your life. Yes, of course. Um, and yeah, again, like Bachelor male leads, even thinking about like
The,
Clayton.
yes, I was gonna say Clayton famously
Yes.
slept with all three women, I believe, in the
Yes,
fantasy suites.
and announced it in a way that all of the women were pissed. Where they were like, "Well, we're the ones that are going to be thrown to the wolves. This misogynistic bachelor audience is going to slut shame us, and it's so embarrassing having that information out there." Whereas, like, we never look at Clayton and be like, "What a whore,"
Yeah.
you know?
There's no way. And I mean, I'm trying to remember back to even as early as Bob Guinea's season. This was like in the 2000s when he was having sex with some of the women on group dates or something as scandalous as that, right? But no one, I mean,
Right?
that was well before 2015, and no one really blinked an eye on it. Well, to be fair, I think that wasn't really made public until more recently, but still, even if it had been made public, Bob Guinea would not have gotten that much hatred from
Yeah.
audiences as Kaitlyn Bristowe did in 2015.
Totally, totally. So let's get into speaking of Nick Viall, because that is what kind of kicked all of this off was the fact that she slept with him before the fantasy suites. They end up having kind of an ongoing feud after the season. And apparently Nick had developed an interest in Caitlyn during her appearance on Chris's season, and he began communicating with Caitlyn online. And they would talk on the phone, they would FaceTime, and then he famously shows up during a group date after the season had already started. Obviously, the men did not take well to him because of that. And I don't know. I feel like that's kind of like an unfair advantage if you have a pre-existing relationship before going into the show where you're meeting all of these guys for the first time.
Well, totally. And she even admitted, or Nick may have admitted, that they were talking even when
Mhm.
she was filming. So sometimes
Yes.
she would leave group dates. She had access to her phone. The men on her season, of course, did not.
Yes.
And she would even talk with Nick. And she even went so far as to suggest for Nick to come on to the season, knowing full well
Yes.
that she knew Shawn was her front runner and that she likely was going to choose him at the end, which she's admitted many a time after the season's aired. So she was definitely kind of playing the field. Now, what I will say is I think this is very interesting when we think about the time of 2015. So this is when Instagram really started to take off. And I'm even thinking to Ben Higgins' season. Of course, he was on Caitlyn's season, then he ended up being the Bachelor. Lauren Bushnell, now Lauren Lane, Amanda Stanton, a bunch of other girls. Becca was also on a season. That's when Instagram started taking off. And I think Nick and Caitlyn are doing we're doing a lot of what is very rampant in Bachelor Nation now. It's
Mm-hmm.
so easy to slide into contestants' DMs that you may be attracted to on a season
Mm-hmm.
that you're watching live. That's just the name of the game. When you go on the
Yeah.
Bachelor franchise, you're entering a dating pool that's humongous. Versus
Yeah.
then in Instagram, Nick and Kaitlyn were talking through DMs, and that was kind of unheard of at the time, you have to remember. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that also was unprecedented.
Yeah, totally, totally. And yeah, Nick later claims that she was DMing him during the season, like when she was filming, like you said, and was like, I want you to come. I want you to come on the show. I want you to show up. It's all very
Messy.
messy, all very messy. And obviously, the men are upset when Nick shows up, and then also when he sleeps with Kaitlyn, their lead. Like, they all hate him, obviously. Again, though, this is like the first time that a lead on a lead of a Bachelorette season, franchise season, is so open and candid about hooking up outside of the fantasy suites. Because again, like with Bob Guinea, for instance, or whoever it is, like it's probably happened, but like she is actually talking about it and being open about it. Um, and then famously, she rejects Nick's proposal, mid proposal, and chooses Shawn Booth instead, Nick's enemy of the season. Shawn hates Nick. And after the final rose, Nick lashed out at her and says those words I said. He always has so many words for the person that rejects him, just like with Andy Dorfman.
Yeah.
If you didn't love me, why did you make love to me?
That
Or
was
should I
pretty below
say,
the belt.
if you don't love me, why did you make love to me?
It was like saliva muttering,
Spitting,
stammering
spitting
noise.
all
Yeah.
over my face. So he says to Kaitlyn, those words I said to you, I'll never have that back. I don't understand what the heck you were thinking there's no good way, but this is the best way to break his heart. As in, like, he was in the middle of proposing, and then she like waits for him to say a few things and then is like, wait, Nick, stop.
So what Caitlyn has later admitted was she did not want Nick down at the bottom two. She actually wanted Ben Higgins and Sean Booth to be final two.
Oh my God, I didn't
She,
know
yeah,
this.
so she's later admitted. I just remember this from hearing a podcast episode. I can't remember the actual like episode that she talked about this on, but she always knew Sean was going to be number one. She knew that from very early on the season, and she told producers, "I don't want to do this to Nick again. I don't want to put him in the same scenario that he was just a year prior on Andy's season. Like, let's save him the humiliation and give him his dignity." And the producers actually forced her to keep Nick on, despite her wanting to have Ben bottom two, and she wanted Ben to be the bachelor anyways. So she said that it was completely against her volition to do that to Nick. But obviously, it's a
Wow.
show, so they need to replay history and make sure that Nick was again bottom two and then lost again.
Wow. 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 I did not even know that, but I love that for him. Couldn't have happened to a better person. I'm sorry.
Yeah, truly.
Um, Nick is announced as the Bachelor lead after a successful stint on Bachelor in Paradise. And Kaitlyn said she was happy for him. In 2017, he's chosen to be on Dancing with the Stars. And Kaitlyn famously came out and said that Bachelor creator Mike Weiss banned her from joining the show when she was offered to compete. And she kind of made this feminist stand where she said, I believe men and women should be afforded the same opportunities. That has not been the case with the Bachelorettes and the Bachelors. I had an offer to Dancing with the Stars and was told by Mike I could not. I was told by Mike that it is bad for his brand and that he is sick of people wanting fame from his show, which good for her, honestly. So we will get to her relationship with John Booth. I'm sorry to the person who hates when we say, and we'll get to that, but like we're going to get to that. We're just a little bit skipping around. Um, she following her successful stint on The Bachelorette, and she is happily, or so we think, engaged to Shawn Booth at the time. In 2017, she launches her podcast Off the Vine, where she interviews fellow reality stars, celebrities, and friends, chats about everything from relationships to pop culture. And some of the criticism she's gotten is that she seems unprepared for interviews sometimes, doesn't always watch the show or the content related to her guests, and tends to veer discussions back to herself, even when guests share like really personal stories. And this is something I have noticed. I've not listened to that many episodes. Everything has to tie back to Kaitlyn. Have you noticed this, Christy? Have you listened to her podcast?
Yeah, I used to listen to it a lot in when she first began, even so much that I attended a live podcast tour of hers. I think in 2018, me and three of my girlfriends attended a show at the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco. And holy cow, it was the most chaotic live show I think I've ever been to. She had special guest Lauren Elizabeth, who is friends with the Toast Girls, Claudia and Jackie. She has her own podcast, I think, Mood with Lauren Elizabeth. And it was just pure chaos. You could tell that they were not prepared at all. And I think this literally is just a testament to what the critics are saying about her podcast. She comes in kind of just winging it, interviewing people without having like a clear structure of what she wants to talk about, any background on who they are. Doesn't really tie the conversation back to them. It always goes back to herself. I just remember being very annoyed that I had spent like however much it was, $50 or whatever on a ticket. Also, what was really funny was Blake Horstman, who is now engaged, I believe, and has a child with
Yeah.
Giannina from Love is Blind season one. He was actually the opening act for Kaitlyn Bristowe's podcast live tour. And when I tell you, I have never seen such bad DJing in my life. And not that I'm any connoisseur of DJing, but literally he was pressing play on like a play. It wasn't even like a mix. It was just like one song after the other. And it was Kesha and like Dynamite and like
Oh my God, that's
Down by Jay
so
Sean.
funny.
It was so bad. Not that like I'm a lover of all those songs. Listen, they're nostalgic as hell, but like if you're doing a DJ set, maybe don't just press play on a playlist from Spotify. It was horrible.
I feel like that's what all DJs do low key. I'm just like, okay, you're playing a playlist. Like I could do this.
Yeah.
Um, that's so funny though. That is, I knew actually that you had been to a live show of hers and you said it was very chaotic. Um, and there's also been criticism about how I think what some people love about her podcast is that she is so vulnerable and talks about her personal life and personal relationships and conflicts a lot. Some people say, it's a little too much. It overshadows everything else that the show should be about, which is, your interviews and pop culture and stuff like that. Um, and, she was, to her credit, one of the first Bachelor podcasts. Like she was kind of like, I don't want to call her a pioneer because it was 2017. Like a lot of people had podcasts even back in 2017. But in terms of Bachelor podcasts, she was one of the first. And she expressed actually on Shannon Ford's podcast that she feels a little insecure that other people have podcasts now. She's no longer the only Bachelor alum with a big platform. And again, like so many have launched podcasts at this point. Pretty much all of them have podcasts now.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it kind of goes back to Kaitlyn, like everything kind of has to be about Kaitlyn and her world. I think that she has to feel like she is that, special one.
Yeah.
And people that criticize her say that this is evidence of how much she loves the spotlight and is kind of bitter about sharing it instead of saying there's room for everyone. Like we just launched our podcast last year. Like if someone was like, no, sorry, there's no more room for pop culture or like snark podcasts, like we'd be like, okay, well, like we're gonna do it anyway. Because and if someone else wanted to start a podcast similar to ours, I would say there's room for everyone. I mean, as long as you're not like, stealing our content, but like there's room for everyone, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think that Caitlyn has, Olivia put in her notes here, she does have a fragile ego and she has a lot of insecurities. And I think I honestly like resonate with her a lot when it comes to that. Like, I'm certainly, we know that we're not above reproach when it comes to criticism and we do a snark podcast. So people are free and able to snark on us all they want. It doesn't mean it hurts any less, and you can do things to protect yourself. But I can see that she is definitely someone who's in the comments. She's not
Yeah.
necessarily shielding herself from these mean things that people are saying about her online, and she can't help herself but to clap back. And I think that as her platform has grown, I think to an extent, when your platform is as big as hers, you just have to let it go by the wayside. You can't let it impact you. And I
Yeah.
don't think she's
Yeah.
ever gone beyond that.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people have noticed about her is that she always reacts. She always reacts to whatever criticism she's getting, and she seems to have a fragile ego and pretty glaring insecurities and, often will seek validation by name dropping her accomplishments like winning Dancing with the Stars and that happens later, by the way. We'll get to that. I'm sorry, we'll get to that. Um and stuff like that. In terms of other business ventures, she launched Spade and Sparrows, her wine brand, in 2019. And there have been some comments about the taste and the price not being very fair, not very good. And she also launched a line of hair accessories called ette, known for scrunchies. And again, there were comments about the quality, the cost, and she ended up stepping away from it just a couple of years ago. She launched it in 2018, but she said she
I
stretched herself too thin.
I remember being at her live show and they were selling the Do Edit scrunchies, obviously. And I think like one scrunchie was an exorbitant price, like I don't maybe like $12 or something for a scrunchie. I'm like, are you joking? It was crazy. But the thing was, scrunchies were such a thing back in like 2018, 2019, and people were buying the hell out of them. I remember it seemed to be a very successful business venture for her.
Mhm.
And I'm actually shocked that she discontinued it. But I guess in the landscape of style now, there's not really a room for scrunchies anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And still, on her podcast, she still throws shade at Nick Viall. So this feud is ongoing. And she's playing a word association game on one episode in 2019 with former bachelorettes, other ones. And when asked who came to mind when they heard the words "the right reasons," Kaitlyn goes, "Not Nick Viall." And Nick claps back in the comment section of the post and tags her and says, "Kaitlyn Bristowe DMs me 2 weeks into filming, asked me to show up, pick someone else, makes jokes post show at my expense and national interviews to cover own ass. 3 years later, same ol'." So I just think that's funny. It's kind of like a, loser on loser crime.
Yeah, definitely.
um, and okay, so now let's get into her engagement to Shawn Booth. And again, the Nick thing heavily ties into how the relationship plays out, right? Because Nick joins the cast. Shawn Booth knows that they had sex before the fantasy suites when she was, again, not that there's anything wrong with that. We're not slut shaming her at all. She should feel empowered to take a test drive. But Shawn, being the man that she ultimately picks, it seems like maybe wasn't able to get over this. And yeah, he apparently didn't take the news too well when he eventually did find out. He didn't know at the time when it happened.
He didn't. And I remember they were on a one-on-one date. Shawn and Caitlin were on a one-on-one date a couple days after her and Nick had consummated their relationship. And she had admitted to Shawn, this is what happened the other night. I wanted to be honest with you. And I
Hmm.
distinctly remember they were at this bar and they were at this like private room and Shawn got up and was very upset. And to your point, they never got over this. It seemed like this was always an obstacle in their relationship during the show and post show for years after.
Hmm.
It was very clear that Shawn was not over it, her
Yeah,
quote unquote dishonesty, and how I think he really kept harping on the fact that to Caitlyn of, if you knew you were going to pick me this entire time as what you continue to say, why would you have done that with Nick? And I think that's what
right.
they were never able to get over, that breaking of their trust.
Yeah, exactly. And she says that he struggled with this jealousy and that, on the show, he hated Nick, would just refer to him as the other guy. And again, questioned why she would do something that would jeopardize their relationship if she knew she was going to pick Shawn. Um, this was a big deal. And I remember this spoiled the outcome for me in when the season was airing. Kaitlyn accidentally spoils the outcome of her season by posting a Snapchat of her and Shawn in bed together weeks before the finale aired. And she deleted it quickly, but it showed Kaitlyn a shirtless Shawn, and it obviously spoiled the season. And ABC producers were understandably livid. And they later explained the mishap on Jimmy Kimmel and called it a big mistake.
I
Um,
remember this, Sophie.
Same.
I remember seeing it on Snapchat and being like, wait a minute. Did she mean to post this? Like being shook. And yeah, that's like not good. I think this is my theory. I think that ABC was all like Mike Fleiss, the entire showrunners of The Bachelor never got over that she
Hmm.
spoiled their season weeks ahead of the finale airing. I think that was a large part of problem. I mean, they also, I don't think Mike Fleiss is an angel. Like he's had really, really serious allegations brought up
Oh
against
God,
him
yeah.
by his ex-wife. He's definitely no angel sweetheart, but I think he's definitely like a kind of a misogynist or is a
hmm
misogynist. At the same time, I think that didn't put any like green flags in her field, so to speak, or whatever. Like they were not pleased with her at all. And I get why.
Yeah. And I low key was shocked because I thought for sure she was going to pick Nick because I could sense the chemistry was there. She wanted to have sex with him before the fantasy suites. I was like, she really likes him. Like, I really thought she was going to pick Nick. And again, like, this is one of the most shameful things about me is that I thought Nick was hot at the time. Um, Please don't come for me, you guys. Like, I'm sorry. I thought Nick was so hot that season. It's disgusting to think about.
He looked better. I mean, compared to Andy's season,
Yeah.
new person.
Yeah, he had like a glow up and it was before he started getting Botox and fillers. So he just looked like a cute guy, you
Yeah.
know? He looked like he worked in sales at the time. Like he just looked like a cute, normal guy. Um, but in any case, Kaitlyn and Shawn kind of ride off into the sunset together. They end up moving to Nashville in 2015 after the show. And they end up making their rounds and media appearances and all of that. They even have a joint Snapchat account called Boothstow together, which TBT to Snapchat, the Snapchat era. I know a lot of you kids still use it, but not us. Um, for the next few years, they remain engaged, but without immediate wedding plans. And this often happens, I feel like, with bachelor couples because you kind of speed run the engagement. And then you're like, okay, well, we're engaged. Let's take our time and get to know each other further before we actually officially make it official. So I never take it as a huge red flag when couples that come from the Bachelor or Bachelorette take some time to officially get married. I feel like look at like JoJo
I
and
was gonna
Jordan,
say them. Yeah.
JoJo Fletcher and Jordan Rogers took year. They just got married. I want to say like
Yeah.
2 years ago, maybe, and
I think, yeah.
they got engaged in 2016.
It was legitimately like a 5 year engagement for
Yeah.
them. And I think it totally makes sense that couples are not rushing to the altar. And in fact, so many of leads and people that they ended up choosing say, we actually started dating and getting to know each other post show. Like being in the show is, I hate continuing to use this word, but it is a container of just like it's false shit. It's falsehoods. It's not real life.
Yes.
You're not ingratiated in each other's lives. You don't meet each other's families except for one, hometown date. This is why Love is Blind has such a higher success rate than The Bachelor is because they're filming in these contestants' own cities. They're literally ingratiated
hmm
in their lives, their day-to-day lives while they're working. And that's why it is so successful compared to The Bachelor
Yeah.
when it's like you're in this fake life.
Yeah. It's just like not real life. Um, Caitlyn ends up splitting time between Nashville and New York City in late 2017 because she was starred in a Broadway show called Home for the Holidays. Shawn noted the change of scenery brought them really close together during that period. And, in multiple interviews, she would get grilled about wedding plans and she would just say, they're taking things slow, not setting a wedding date yet. She also openly started talking about freezing her eggs. And, Shawn would praise her in the press and said they were building a strong foundation day by day. And, I think at the same time, fans noted that by late 2017, because at this point it's more than 2 years after the show ended. Whenever the topic of wedding dates came up, the couple seemed non-committal or a bit uneasy. So some people were like, is that a red flag?
Hmm.
Like you and I were just talking about is that, it's not real life being on the show. So to me, that isn't a red flag, but I could see why, um, you know, to the viewers, it might be. So 2018 is when, this tension seems to be rising. And also, how crazy is it? Like, they were only together from 2015 to 2018. For some reason at the time, it felt like they were together for 7 years.
I completely agree. I remember when these rumors were circulating on Reddit before they had actually come clean about their breakup, people were saying, "Why is she in Canada? And why is Shawn not with her?" And even months before she had gone to Canada to do this solo journey to go hang out with her family, how come they haven't been photographed? Why hasn't he been liking their pictures?
Yeah.
Why haven't they been commenting on one another's pictures? Like it had been speculated for months that they were broken
Yes.
up until finally they couldn't hold it in any longer.
Yes. And it seems like it happened, several months before they finally announced it,
Hmm.
as, that's pretty common to do.
Yes.
But yeah, people started to notice by mid 2018 that Kaitlyn and Shawn seemed to be spending a lot of time apart. Shawn was busy launching his new gym, Booth Camp. That's actually pretty like catchy. Booth Camp.
It totally is. I have friends that have gone. It seems nice.
Which would you rather, Booth Camp or Cut Fitness?
You're such a cut fitness. Cut fitness is honestly so it doesn't give great energy. It's in like a random area in Orange County. It's just like, yeah, it's like in that business industrial area. Dark energy.
Dark energy. And this is some fun Olivia lore. Olivia's as a guy she used to date on and off for a couple of years, is divorced and from Nashville, and his ex-wife cheated on him with Shawn while he was working at Booth Camp. And it's just unclear if this was while he was dating Kaitlyn. I'm going to go with no because we have no proof that he like cheated on Kaitlyn. But yeah, kind of funny. Um, and yeah, they finally announced the breakup in late 2018. And this was after more than 3 years engaged. And again, the fact that there were no concrete wedding plans had become a red flag. As People magazine reported at the time, wedding plans never got off the ground. And Kaitlyn wants to be married and have kids, but it didn't seem like they were on the same page. This disparity in future goals seemed to be a major factor in the split. Um, Christy, were you heartbroken when this happened?
No, because it was the writing was on the wall and it was so clear that they were struggling. And I remember her Snapchat stories or her Instagram stories at the time were so depressed and it was just so clear she was going through it. So I was more just relieved on behalf of both of them that they were finally copping to it, to something that we
Mm-hmm.
had known all along. And to your point, I think oftentimes when Hollywood couples separate, like the first couple that comes to mind right now is Sydney Sweeney and Jonathan Davino or whatever. It's very clear that they've been not together for months now and they're finally ready to just come out with the
Yeah.
public. So I'm just more relieved on behalf of them. They could breathe a sigh of relief that they don't have to hide this anymore.
Totally, totally. And after they release, a joint statement that's kind of like the typical, like, after 3 incredible years, we've decided to go our separate ways. Caitlyn breaks her silence on her podcast and she fought back tears and basically said it was not her decision. She said that
Mm.
she thought they were going to choose the road where they ended up together. I never took being engaged lightly. I was willing to do whatever it took to make it work. She described herself as heartbroken, but also expressed gratitude for the support from fans. And yeah, again, like there were just a lot of rumors swirling that the engagement had ended months and months and months before they actually announced it, which would not surprise any of us, I feel like. Oh, we are entering the Jason Tartick era. Oh God. What are your feelings on Jason Tartick before we dive in?
Okay, so when he was on Becca Kufrin season, I remember just finding him to be such a normie and being very refreshed by the fact that he had a normal finance job. He wasn't some like, I'm sorry, Shawn, like fitness boot camp instructor. Like I just remember feeling relieved that he seemed like such a normie. He didn't live in a thoughty city. He wasn't like a New York or LA based guy. He lived in Seattle at the time. I think he was working at JP Morgan. He just seemed like, for all intents and purposes, a normal guy. And I remember finding him to be incredibly attractive as well. And when I found out that they were dating, I kind of was like, huh, that's a little bit random, but I knew Jason has always been very financially driven. I've listened to him on
Mm-hmm.
various podcasts saying that he wants to build a great, beautiful nest egg for his future children. He wants to acquire generational wealth. He is in it for the paycheck and good for him. Like, I'm not shading that at
Mm-hmm.
all. I knew the writing was on the wall when they first got together because I thought, I know, just knowing the little I know about Jason, he will ride this relationship to get his bag. And I knew that
Yes.
she was so independently successful on her own that there was going to be a break in that relationship. And I ended up being right. Like, this is what literally, and well, obviously, Sophie will dive into the intricacies of what ended up happening, but it was literally
Mm-hmm.
that. They had competing interests in like building a following. And Caitlyn, honestly, at the end of the day, ended up feeling like she was being taken advantage of.
Yeah, so there also are rumors that there was maybe some overlap because she seemed to have moved on really quickly with
Mm-hmm.
Jason. And Shawn ended up coming out and saying that it hurt him to see her move on so quickly. And actually, they met because Jason was a guest on her podcast in October 2018, and they hit it off. And again, some are like, was there overlap? Um, what's the deal with that? Because it seems to have happened very quickly. And she insists that she never cheated. But again, Shawn's own remarks that Kaitlyn moved on so quickly fueled this gossip. And even after she starts, you know, coming out with the fact that she's dating Jason, a lot of things start swirling about her and Shawn's breakup still. Um, Again, like the fact that she felt a little bit used potentially by Shawn and that he was hanging onto the relationship to boost his business. And
Hmm.
Kaitlyn herself hints at that later. And again, it's like it seems like history almost repeated itself a little bit with the Jason relationship too. Like maybe like her picker's off, but this is something that ends up being accused of Jason also when they get together. And also the fact that Shawn seems to have not fully gotten over what happened with Nick, like we mentioned. And yeah, Shawn was not entirely happy with the fact that she seems to have moved on so fast. But again, it's like if he broke up with her and he had been over it for months, if they really broke up that summer, months before they announced it, I don't know what the rules are.
I
Um,
remember when Ben Higgins and Ashley I, they have a podcast that's still going on called Almost Famous. And I distinctly remember they had had Shawn Booth on for an episode to basically divulge how he felt now that Kaitlyn had gone public with her relationship with Jason Tartick. And I literally remember it being such a salacious, juicy interview, and I was eating it all up. And they were asking him all the hard-hitting questions. And Shawn started crying mid-interview, and they had to cut it because he was getting so emotional talking about how heartbroken he was at how quickly Kaitlyn was able to move on. And to what you just said, Caitlyn chooses these men that I don't doubt that they didn't love her. I think it's very clear Shawn and Jason both loved
mhm,
Caitlyn, and she would agree. But I think that they also love the fame and success that they could acquire from being with her. So
mhm.
Shawn, by like on one end, he was opening up boot camp, and Caitlyn has even said herself in interviews, I felt like he was hanging on to that relationship until boot camp opened, so that like the press and the
Mhm.
marketing of being with me could fuel that people coming in the
Yes.
door. And then, of course, with Jason, the whole thing with them was her podcast was the one thing that she felt she was able to acquire so much success from and such a big following. She felt like that was her thing. As Sophie
Mhm.
earlier mentioned, she felt almost annoyed that people from Bachelor Nation were developing their own
Mhm.
podcast because in her mind, that was her thing.
Yeah.
And that was the one like non-negotiable thing she had specifically asked Jason to not do. She's like, no matter what you do, if you start a podcast, that is going to be a fracture in our relationship because that's the one thing that is like wholeheartedly mine that I know I'm so successful at. It's the one thing that brings me so much joy. And if you start a podcast, resentment will grow. And I think there was a bit of like confusion over like when he decided to ultimately go over it because allegedly, that one show called it's like clickbait or something. It's with
Yeah, one of
Joe.
the Bachelor ones with Grocery Store Joe or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Tasha at one point was on it, but it's like one of the official Bachelor podcasts, like franchise podcasts. And I guess at one point, Jason, oh God, it's witching hour. I guess at one point, Jason was asked to be on that show and he turned it down. And people think that it was because Caitlyn specifically requested for him to not do the show.
Right, right. And so it's like, what other things? But also, it's like the podcast thing, and we'll get more into this, but like the podcast thing, it's like, what else do you expect him to do? Like what else do you expect him to do? He's an ex like Bachelorette contestant. There are only so many options. But yeah, there's like a lot of when she comes out with her Jason relationship, there's still like a lot of fallout with Shawn Booth, who by all accounts seems to be really happy now. He has a baby and seems to be just happy and has moved on. But there was also fucking Booth camp. Apparently he would wake up at 5 a.m. to start his day, whereas Kaitlyn would go out and drink a lot. And that becomes a theme, the fact that she is kind of a partier.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that may have played a part, but either way,
Yeah.
even
Different
she
lifestyles, completely different lifestyles for
com-
Shawn and Caitlyn.
completely different lifestyles. Um and yeah, she even like at one point goes on Jason's podcast and talks about it. And um again, like accuse Shawn of having ulterior motives, which is just ironic because it seems like Jason may have had ulterior motives also. Um, Okay, so in 2020, Kaitlyn goes on Dancing with the Stars. She ends up winning, so she finally gets her way, which good for her. And she also is, in her relationship with Jason Tartick for the next few years until 2023. And they end up getting engaged in 2021. This is also around the time that Kaitlyn is asked to co-host The Bachelorette with Tayshia, while Chris Harrison, he's not on hiatus. He got fired, actually. And this was after the racism scandal because he defended Rachel Kirkconnell in her antebellum photos. And that was kind of like a big opportunity for her where
Huge.
yeah, that was a big deal. She got to host it with Tayshia. And, there's some like mixed reports about whether or not they thought it was going to be like a permanent thing or if they knew that Jesse Palmer was eventually going to end up hosting it full time.
Hmm.
Either way, I think that Jesse Palmer is great. I think he's better than Chris Harrison, honestly. It's not like sucking me back into the franchise, but I think he does a great job. But yeah, a lot of people were like a lot of people didn't think they did a good job.
Yeah, that was pretty controversial. And there was even some um uh tension between Chris Harrison and Caitlyn that they both kind of hashed out on Chris's podcast. Of course, he now has a podcast. I think it's
Hmm.
like the most dramatic podcast ever or
Yes.
something. And they rehashed it out because Caitlyn basically explained to Chris on air, listen, I felt like there was a lot of tension, like you resented me for basically taking on your role. And I guess her and Chris were able to squash the beef. But I thought that was kind of interesting that Chris Harrison almost felt a little bit threatened by Caitlyn and Tayshia kind of taking over his role.
Yeah, totally. And actually, yeah, so in early 2023, she goes on Chris Harrison's podcast and it got her some backlash at the time because again, Chris Harrison had been ousted from his position, which by the way is the cushiest job in the world to host the battle. These hosts get paid so much money and all they do is like show up for like a few weeks a year just to be like, hey, so yeah, this is going to be a really dramatic finale or like whatever it is. They say like, two lines every episode and they make so much fucking money. So Chris
Yeah.
Harrison really fucked that up by, defending Rachel Kirkconnell dressing up for antebellum parties when he really didn't need to. Um, so yeah, she got some backlash for that. And they thought it was a little hypocritical of her to, collaborate with someone who had who defended racist behavior. I'm not, accusing Rachel Kirkconnell of being like a racist forever, but this was racist behavior. And Kaitlyn hated the fact that she got held accountable. She said she got quote unquote hate from Bachelor Nation, and she said it was really hurtful. And that obviously invited more mockery because people were like, you should expect this backlash. And you could also just take accountability for the fact that you are
Mm,
collaborating with this person who got fired for a reason.
right.
And it seems she was more upset about the negative comments um, than she was about like the racial implications and like how the people she could have hurt by her actions. And yeah. So, and I think again, she was still kind of a little bit stung about the fact that she was also ousted from the host role at the time.
Right.
And okay, so back to Jason. They break up after 4 years together in 2023, and they released a joint statement and appeared civil, RIP.
Which, by the way, I can't believe her relationship with Jason outlasted her relationship with Shawn.
That is kind of crazy to think about when you put it that way. Like it feels like her
Right?
and Shawn were together for a decade. I don't know why.
You know what it was? I think it's because, the older you get, the quicker time goes on. Maybe it's
Yeah.
because we were younger and it just felt
Yeah.
longer, but we're older
Yeah.
when they were together. But yeah, it's kind
Yeah.
of crazy to think about it like that.
Yeah. And what I think is interesting also is that she said that she was attracted to Jason because he had a regular job as a VP at a bank and he wasn't an influencer. And she was like, I do not want to be with an influencer. And he apparently lost his job because of a sexual story she shared on her podcast. But she says he wasn't happy at that job anyway. So I think it was kind of a blessing in disguise. His family was upset. It felt like my fault. She said the story was that she orgasmed from dry humping and making out with Jason.
Yeah, and that is so embarrassing, first of all. Not I'm not saying that's an embarrassing story. It's like, but divulge that, knowing that maybe his mom or his brother could be listening. I don't know that I cringe on behalf of Jason really more because like he was kind of like he didn't ask for that information to be shared.
Yeah, yeah. It's cringy. But she recounts how like after he lost his job, he moved in with her and face first dove into the influencer life. And she said this was hard for her because dating an influencer was a non-negotiable for her, but she was going to look past it. And again, like we previously mentioned, she had asked him specifically not to start a podcast. He did it anyway. She wanted to feel quote unquote special for having her own podcast. And the way she sees it, he chose the podcast over her.
Mm.
But again, like if he lost his job because of her, what else is a former Bachelorette star supposed to do?
Right.
Like,
And with men, it's so much more difficult to like shill a product than it is to start a podcast. Like women are just so much
mhm.
far they're more willing to purchase things on affiliate links, things like that. Whereas
Yeah,
with Jason, like the best way he can get his bag in lieu of no longer having his stable finance job is really to start a podcast. So I cannot blame him.
yeah, exactly. And apparently, like you said, he was offered this spot hosting clickbait where he was going to be making over 100K a year with some percentage of ad revenue. And he had to turn that down because of Kaitlyn. And again, it's like, what else did he have to turn down? And also, it shouldn't be surprising that at that point he was maybe a little bit financially dependent on her because if he's not allowed to start a podcast or like do anything and he also got fired from his job, like what's he supposed to do?
Yeah.
I don't, it's hard to feel bad for someone that like, is in that position, but I can understand. And she, ends up coming out and this is just recently 2025 where she says that she felt financially kind of used by him and that he was kind of like riding a wave, quote unquote, and
Mm.
insinuated that he was weird about money. And like her house was paid off. He lived in the house with her, but she would have to go to him and be like, "Can you like split the bills?" Um, I don't know. It's very interesting. And she also says that she felt like the whole relationship was about Instagram.
Mm. Yeah, that's when you get
Yeah.
really testy when you have these couples that are formed on a reality show. And I can't even imagine what that's like to come out of a show where everyone is cheering you on. They're hoping and praying for your success. And you feel almost like you owe it to these viewers, people you don't know, to keep the relationship afloat, even if it means like your mental health going down the drain.
Hmm.
And not only just like feeling like you need to keep appearances up, but also they both understand, Jason and Kaitlyn both understand that there is money to be made as a couple. You are so
Hmm.
much more successful as a pair than you are independently. And again, Jason being very money driven, he wants to build that really nice nest egg for his family, his future family. He's not going to let that go. I think that they both were dealing with their own separate like demons in the relationship and they were just holding on by a thread, keeping it going for their own to keep, for their own security for different reasons,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah. I think that like Jason, like we've said, has always gotten those like thirsty allegations because following his split from Kaitlyn, and apparently this was Kaitlyn's decision, by the way, she has been open about the fact that it was her decision. And they unfollow each other on Instagram and he starts dating TikToker Kat Stickler. They've since broken up, but that was kind of like a very heavily social mediaized relationship. And she had also liked Instagram comments suggesting that an ex shouldn't flaunt a relationship so soon. And people think that that's a little, okay, once again with the victim mentality, especially because it's a little hypocritical. Like she had done the same thing, flaunting a new relationship right after she had ended things or she had gotten broken up with by Shawn.
Yeah, it's so funny because Shawn literally went on Almost Famous with Ben and Ashley, was crying because of how quickly Caitlyn moved on, just as you mentioned. And then she's getting upset with Jason about doing the same thing. And she was not quiet about it. Like Shawn did a podcast, was super, super emotional, was near tears. And Caitlyn, I remember all online was like posting stories about how upset she was of how could Jason do this to me? How could he
Yeah.
disrespect me like this? She was very hot and bothered by the cat stickler of it all, for sure.
Yes. Yes. And meanwhile, she is she kind of went on a few podcasts and was talking about how Jason was playing the victim and that she was
Mhm.
disappointed in him playing the victim and acting like he was upset after the breakup, even though he was, to be fair, the one that was broken up with. I don't know. It's hard either way. Like, I have been in both positions, the one doing the dumping and the one that gets dumped, and they both suck for different reasons. It's hard to
Mhm.
like say, well, he's going to be more upset because he got dumped. I will say that getting dumped, probably looking back on it, hurt more and was more traumatizing, especially if it's a long-term relationship. But obviously, that depends on the relationship. Um, yeah, and apparently, it was kind of maybe a long time coming. Jason says that he kind of saw it coming but was avoiding it, and that there was some resentment at play. And it
Mhm.
was it was resentment that was at play, probably a lot of it career wise, and it just wasn't worked through. It was instead kind of like ignored and buried. Um, okay. So now to a more, I guess this isn't present day yet, but we're almost there. The dog custody drama. So Kaitlyn and Jason had two dogs together, and they had agreed originally to split time with their dogs 50-50. Kaitlyn apparently was not down for that right away. She was obsessed with posting the dogs nonstop. And actually, on Shannon Ford's podcast, she said that she even considered pursuing legal action to keep the dogs full time. And then she later reveals that the rescue agency they adopted the dogs from did not permit joint custody arrangements as stipulated in the adoption contract. And this is because, it can lead to instability and anxiety for the dogs, which makes sense. And, to prioritize the well being of Ramen and Pino, the dogs' names, Kaitlyn assumed full custody, and Jason also claims he wasn't allowed to say goodbye to the dogs, which is kind of sad. But Pino was apparently a gift to Kaitlyn from Jason, and the other dog, Ramen, was adopted by Kaitlyn before Jason moved in with her. Yeah, and she also was making snarky comments about Jason and Kat on her podcast amidst all this dog drama. And she said that she wanted to gift Jason and his new family a new dog so he wouldn't be so attached to the shared dogs.
Yikes.
Which is like, that's so fucked up. I'm sorry. I think that's so fucked up. Because it's
Yeah,
like, of course, he's going to have an attachment to those dogs. Like, he's going to, and getting like a new other dog isn't going to change the fact that he's attached to those dogs that he lived with and took care of for years.
right. I mean, it's that's actually cruel and unusual punishment to tell someone they can no longer see their dog. Speaking of dogs, Hank knows.
Hank knows we're talking about dogs.
Yep.
Oh my God. So Caitlin also reveals that she had a symbolic funeral for her and Jason's breakup. She said it was a mental exercise to say goodbye and make a little peace with it, which is so interesting to me.
Have you ever done that, by the way, like a sentimental, symbolic funeral for someone or something?
No, I'm sure, honestly, like, I'm sure it's like a healthy coping mechanism, but no, I can't say I have. What about you?
Yeah, I once went to this like really woo-woo wellness retreat and we did this fire ceremony and we had to write things down. It wasn't just like burning them, like it was a whole thing. We had to like walk around this like it sounds like very witchy now that I'm saying this out loud. It wasn't like a crazy retreat. It's like Miraval Wellness Resort. Um, you've probably heard of it. It's like very commercial, but I've done one of those before. Yeah. It's very healing.
Oh my God, I kind of like am into that. Like, I'd be
Yeah.
down.
Would recommend.
Okay, so now we're in 2025, and this is like the recent drama that's happened. Also related to dogs is that Jason ends up getting a new dog, like Caitlin, wanted him to. But he used her apparently number one baby name for his rescue dog. And apparently, I think it's a doodle named
Oh,
named Teddy.
yeah. And she said that in her first text message, one of her first messages to Jason, she told him her choice for a boy boy's name if she were to have a son is Teddy.
Teddy is such a freaking common name for a dog, though, especially like a doodle, I
Oh
feel
my
like.
God. I feel like every doodle is named Teddy.
Exactly. So yeah, and she got, some backlash for this. People were like, "You're so immature." She also, something that's important to note about Kaitlyn is that she will frequently post selfies of herself like crying and then like black text. Like we said, she always has to clap back at the haters. Like she's just very, very, very dramatic on social media. And yeah, so she got some backlash for this. And people have theorized that Kaitlyn uses a burner account to comment things in her favor.
Oh, I have
And
no doubt about that. She definitely
yeah.
does.
And there's a lot of just criticism about the fact that she just everything is like she's always like the victim. It's always poor Caitlyn. She was the victim in her breakup with Shawn. She was the victim in her breakup with Jason. Just like she is always the victim no matter what part she plays in the scenario. It's always like poor Caitlyn. And again, it's like Teddy is such a freaking common dog name. Like it's so
It's a reach.
stupid. It's so stupid. And also like, yeah, who cares about the name of your ex's dog? Like,
It's honestly different if it were Jason's newborn son. Like I think that's a
yeah.
little different. The dog thing is a little bit of a reach to me.
Yeah. And she is also, recently on her podcast, even she's bashed Jason a lot recently and coming out and saying again, like podcasting was my thing. How dare him
Yeah.
start his podcast Trading Secrets, which he did eventually start, by the way, was his pretty like successful podcast Trading Secrets, where he talks about finance stuff, as someone with a finance background. So he kind of found his niche. It's not like he was overlapping with her at all. Like, it's just like, again, like she is still bashing him now years later. And apparently she had a friendship breakup with her friend Lorenzo von Rumpf, a longtime friend and stylist, because he apparently buddied up with Jason after the breakup. And something that is interesting about all of this is that she not only did he buddy up with Jason, she accuses him of going live on Instagram while she was drunk and on lorazepam, and she was slurring her words and falling asleep. And she says, I felt taken advantage of. Like, you went live when I was like not fully with it. And yeah, so they have a whole friendship breakup, and he was actually one of her best friends for years and years and years.
Hmm.
He lived with her and Jason pretty much. That's how close they were when she was in LA for Dancing with the Stars. And he felt really hurt by all of this, the way that she is now bashing him. And she has, no problem talking about these people. So, okay. Now we are getting into, and this is kind of like our last chapter, is the Zach Clark relationship. So, Zach Clark, what were your thoughts on Zach Clark? And this is the winner of Tayshia's Bachelorette season. What were your thoughts on Tayshia and Zach? I personally was obsessed with them. It was the one couple that I was really upset when they broke up.
I really loved them. I would actually go so far as to say, having watched The Bachelor for like a decade plus, this was the last season I actually watched in entirety, the Tayshia Claysha season, shall I say, because Claire was the
Yes.
first Bachelorette before she chose Dale. This season was probably the best season of The Bachelorette ever, which is really random because it was a COVID season. The format was so different. They were
Hmm.
filming at La Quinta in Palm Springs. They didn't do any travel because it was the height of COVID. But all the men were so fantastic on the Tayshia season, and Zach is definitely one of them. I loved how like complex and layered and mature all the men seemed on the show, and it felt like such a differentiation from what we're used to seeing with like, these thoughty, again, personal training type dudes that we're used to seeing on the show. I loved Zach. I loved his vulnerability about his sobriety
Hmm.
journey, about how his history with addiction, what it put his parents through, how he was able to get sober, how he's really committed a life to sober living, to spreading the word about how to overcome this affliction with addiction and drugs. I find him to be a very commendable guy. And so I was definitely really sad when I found out that him and Tasha ended up breaking up, and was frankly even more surprised when I found out that the person he chose to date next was someone such as Kaitlyn Bristowe, who's such a party girl.
Yeah. Yes, it is very surprising. And it's also important to note that Tayshia and Kaitlyn were friends. They hosted that
Yes.
season of The Bachelorette together. And now, and they have never, to my knowledge, really come out and confirmed that they are together. It has just been that
Correct.
they've been spotted together. Everyone knows they are, but it's never been confirmed. But it's just funny that she doesn't want to date an influencer or someone who might compete with her in the Bachelorette world, but then she goes on to date another person from the franchise. It's very interesting. Um, and so, these rumors are spreading in 2024 that they're together. And she again takes to Instagram stories to play the victim. And she goes, "You would think by now I'd be used to the hate. I'm not. Your words hurt. Your shaming hurts." She scolded the people spreading rumors for being so invested in someone you don't even know, calling the level of online bullying next level. And I guess it was people accusing her of maybe cheating on Jason. I think maybe people get parasocial and get really invested in these relationships. And maybe we're just upset that her and Jason broke up. But yeah, she freaks out. She goes, "I did not kill someone. I had a party with some of my favorite people. Shame on you, not me. It's hard to bite my dang tongue sometimes. Wish I could share my truth." So she's kind of like denying that her and Zach are together. When it first comes out, when they're first spotted together, turns out they are. And she later comes out and says that she had hinted at the fact that she'd reached out to Tayshia, did not name her, but said, "I'd reached out to a friend before anything happened with her ex." And out of respect for her friend, and this was on the U Up podcast. And this was prior to a date. And she apparently was just wanting to get that friend's blessing and didn't. And she wasn't happy about the answer that she got, but did it regardless.
Right.
So it's just like,
Yeah.
okay.
You weren't asking for permission. You were asking for forgiveness, Caitlin, when you called
Yes.
Tasha.
Yes, exactly. And in a promotion for Bumble that Tasha did, Bumble asked, she's doing a Q&A, if she'd ever date a best friend's ex, and this was seemingly alluding to the rumor. Caitlyn then commented on the video because someone comments, "Take notes, Caitlyn," because Tasha said no. The person goes, "Take notes, Caitlyn," and Caitlyn comments back and said, "They said best friend."
Yeah, that was so shady of Caitlin. And this was recent. This was like within the last like 3 months. I remember when this happened.
Yeah. It's just like, oh my God. She's so immature sometimes for no reason. And Nick Viall actually defended Caitlyn. And I thought that like he kind of made a good point. At the same time, I'm Team Tasha. But he said that he didn't give a fuck who dates who in Bachelor Nation. If two people are single, they have every right. Who gives a shit? It takes two to tango. So, like, fair enough, Nick Viall, fair enough. But what people think is interesting, and to our knowledge, these two are still together. Obviously, Tasha is like one of the most beloved people from Bachelor Nation. She is like one of those popular bachelorettes of all time. She went on
Yeah.
to date Luke Goldbrinson. I don't know if they've broken up. It's been rumored that they are. Luke from Summer House, hot ass couple. Um, but again, like I was even like parasocially like invested in Zach and Tasha. And they had such a sweet engagement proposal on the show. It was like the only time I got emotional watching a proposal on the franchise. And yeah, like Caitlyn got a lot of backlash for seemingly like fucking over her friend Tasha. Understandably so. But what people think is really interesting is that like Zach is sober. He is in recovery from an addiction. And the fact that Zach is with someone like Caitlyn, who has been speculated to she drinks a lot and she is very open about the fact that she drinks a lot. She says before difficult episodes of her podcast where she's going to be talking about something difficult, she takes a tequila shot. There are times when she is not just, on lorazepam with her stylist friend on Instagram Live slurring her words, but very often people have noticed that. And not accusing anyone of having a problem with drinking or an addiction, but people think it's interesting that she clearly likes to, have some wine, have fun. She's kind of more of a partier. And Zach has said that he actually likes hanging out with people who drink and do drugs because he experiences that through them, like osmosis or something. I don't know. I'm not, an expert or recovery expert. I
Yeah.
don't know how healthy that is, but people think that it's definitely an odd pairing.
Yeah. And That's interesting about the Luke and Tasha potentially having broken up, although it's not confirmed. I had not heard that, but you're right. Now that I'm thinking back, I don't remember the last time that they had been photographed together.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like Caitlyn to this day has still not, to my knowledge, confirmed her
Yeah.
relationship with Zach. And I think all we know is we get these random photos of her potentially like, oh my God, is that Zach in the background? Like one of those.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's all
but
like spotted, like,
yeah,
oh, yeah, like, oh, spotted at this concert. It's like, oh my God, they're not Kylie and Timothy. Like, who do you think
right.
they are?
Right. But no, I mean, I know that Caitlyn has talked about her desire to have children, and I know in the middle of this episode we talked about her potentially doing IVF. I don't know if she ever actually ended up going down that path. But if that's with Zach or someone else, like I do hope that she's able to get that in her life. Um, yeah, I mean, Caitlyn's one of those people where she doesn't bother me to the nth degree. She's kind of just she's just messy, and I think she likes to. Not only does she like to talk about her life on her podcast, but she throws it all out there for everyone to really pick apart. And she doesn't really
Hmm.
necessarily do herself the best favor of putting so much of herself out online for people to then ridicule. It's like this
Yeah.
vicious cycle with her, and it's like kind of
Well,
just get offline, Caitlyn.
right. Like, it's like she courts controversy and then she like complains about being the victim when she gets
Yes,
backlash for it. And this is a recent example is in a recent episode of her podcast in April 2025. She is working with Colton Underwood on a project that she's excited to release soon. And if you're not
please.
familiar, Colton Underwood is a former bachelor who was accused of stalking his F1, his fiance, Cassie, after they broke up and putting a tracking device on her car
Some
and being a violent, crazy, like stalker.
Something's not firing at all cylinders.
I know. So it's like, again,
Colton.
like she courts controversy and then she will ultimately, I already predict that, when she does get backlash for this, because she will inevitably, she will be like, why are you guys so mean to me? You don't even know me.
Alex Cooper got a lot of flack for having Colton and
As
like
she
Jamie Lynn
should.
Spears on. Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
like, do not give these people like
A
Colton and Jamie
platform.
Lynn. Yeah, please.
A
I'm
platform.
good with not hearing from either of them. Thanks.
Exactly. And she mentions how, Colton had some troubles after a season of The Bachelor. Doesn't mention the fact that he was a stalker. And
Literally a
apparently,
stalker.
and apparently she asked Cassie's permission before working with him. And people speculate that Cassie knew it just wasn't even worth Caitlyn
Of
telling Caitlyn
course.
no, because Caitlyn was just going to do it anyway, like she did with the Tasha thing.
You're not asking for permission. You're asking for forgiveness. You're going to do it anyway, so don't even bother asking.
Yeah, exactly. And she claims that she's friends with both Cassie and Colton, but it's like, how can you be? Like, literally, how can you be? And she praises Colton as, he's a golden retriever right now.
Excuse me?
And
I
yeah,
literally cannot with that man. Like I've always known since day one, even when he was on Becca Kufrin season, I was like, this man is dark to me. I, I,
yeah,
I was saying for years before he even came out of the closet, I'm like, I think this man likes men, which is fine. But don't put a bunch of women through the rigmarole and put them on a season and let them leave their lives if you're not into women. Like I can't
right.
with that man. And then the
Yeah.
tracking device.
He literally terrorized Cassie. Like, there's no
Yes.
excuse for Caitlyn to be collaborating with this man. People have speculated that
Ugh.
maybe the project has something to do with IVF or fertility or something like that.
I don't give a
But either
fuck.
way, it doesn't
Like,
matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter how righteous your cause or project is going to be when you're working with someone like that. So, again, this is just a perfect example of the cycle that Caitlyn perpetuates, which is court controversy, get backlash for it, complain about the backlash, play the victim, and then do it all over
yes,
again.
yes.
And
If
that
it's not Colton
is,
Underwood, yeah, it's gonna be someone
yeah,
else.
if it's not Chris Harrison, if it's not Colton Underwood, if it's not, dating Zach after Tasha, whatever it is, it's like there's always going to be something.
Yeah.
And it's almost like she thrives off of it. Like, I think that it's like she's in a toxic relationship with the drama.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. So if it's she hates it, but it brings her to life at the same time, and that's something I hope
Yeah.
she's working through.
Exactly, exactly. And Caitlyn is not the worst person alive. She's not evil. She's not like the worst person we've covered on this show by a long shot, but like she definitely has her fair share of just like what the fuck moments.
Yeah.
Um And yeah, like if you guys think that we missed anything, please let us know. Of course, there's always a lot that goes into these. So let us know if there's anything in particular that you'd like us to shout out. We will always go back to anything if need be. But yeah, Christy, what are your thoughts on Kaitlyn Bristowe now?
Yeah, it's been a couple of years since I followed her, to be honest. I think I may still follow her, but I haven't watched her stories or her grid posts in such a long time. So this was a fun way for me to kind of dive back into how fun it used to be to consume Bachelor culture. And she's really at like the epicenter of that, it seems.
Yeah, she is.
Right from her season and having all these men come out of the season to be so successful, the men she's dated after the fact, her messiness, her drama, her controversies, like she's definitely not boring. So I'll give it to her for that. She was born to
Yeah.
kind of be a star. And
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
what about
she
you?
was she was born to be a reality star. I would not hate seeing her on The Traitors, honestly.
Would love it. That's a great let's hopefully someone from the traders is listening and they
Yeah,
could
can
put her
you
name in the
guys like
ring.
I also obviously Nick Viall always talks about how he's like always been asked to go on The Traitors and like he just like turns it down. Like what if Nick Viall and Kaitlyn Bristowe were on the same season as The Traitors? Like
You know
that could
what?
actually be reality TV gold.
I was like, throw Colton Underwood in there.
Oh my God, fuck Colton Underwood.
Except I don't want to give him a paycheck or more
No.
visibility. So scratch that. But
No Colton Underwood, but
you're
like
right.
that could be funny though. Or like throw Sean Booth in there. Throw Jason Tartick in there.
If you put Shawn Booth, Nick, and Caitlyn in a season of The Traitors, I am in. That would be such good
That
reality
would
TV.
I think that like my complaint about that would be is that it would overtake the drama of the traders and it would be too much about like their drama. Oh my, can you imagine the meltdowns that Caitlyn would have every day? I'd be
Oh
like,
yeah,
focus on the game. Like, she'd be like in the middle of the challenge, like crying about like something Jason said. And it's like, no, we're trying to like earn money for the prize pot. What are
prize
you doing?
pot. Yeah. Uh,
Oh God.
well,
Anyway, guys, yeah, that's about it.
I'm curious because this is the second Bachelor person that we have covered. And Nick Viall, I hate to say this, he's really ascended outside of the Bachelor franchise. I feel like Caitlyn is
Ugh.
still very much Bachelor adjacent. Are
Yeah.
there any other Bachelor people that you're like, oh my God, you got to cover this one? The few that come to mind are like Lauren Lane, I think would be a really fun one. Amanda Stanton, Chris Soules, his whole controversy with literally killing a guy. Remember
Yeah.
that?
Oh my God, I forgot about that. Yes.
Like,
Oh my
what?
God.
Are we just gonna forget it? Like,
That's
what?
crazy that that happened.
No, I know that was really scary and horrifying and tragic. There's just so much darkness around the Bachelor franchise. So I'm curious who your Caitlin Bristowe is of The Bachelor, who you'd like us to cover in a future episode, perhaps. Let
Yeah,
us know in the Spotify comments.
let us know like who's your Bachelor franchise like Roman Empire subject. Again, there's so many that have become so huge from that show
Mhm.
that yeah, I feel like there's no shortage of options, and we're excited to hear who yours is and hopefully cover them in the future. But yeah, per usual, leave us a 5-star review, pretty please, if you enjoyed the show. And follow us on Instagram at SnarkBaitPod. Follow Christy at X Knows All, excuse me. Follow me at Soph_Ross. Thank you to Jordan, our producer, Jenna, our social manager, Olivia, our researcher, and thank you, Baby Snarks, for listening. We will see you next week on Dark Energy Tuesday.
See you guys next week. Talk to you then. Bye.
Bye.